Hello, and welcome to another edition of U.S. Tech Workers. I'm your host, Kevin Lynn, and this is the second day that Rolf has covered the Buchanan versus TATA Consultancy Services trial in Oakland, California. Rolf, how are you today?
Doing great, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, Rolf, I know everyone is really excited to hear what happened today. So without any further ado, I'll just jump into it and say, in general, Rolf, what was the tenor of the day? What were the big things that you would say went on today in the trial?
The whole day was taken up with U.S. tech workers, either providing video depositions or testifying. And it was the end of one video deposition from the day before, and then two complete video depositions, plus four U.S. tech workers providing testimony.
Interesting. Now, of the deposition of the testimony, what would you say were the most interesting things that came out? And these were the plaintiffs, correct? Because Tata's witnesses haven't taken the stand yet. Is that correct?
That's correct. These were plaintiffs. I was particularly struck by the testimony provided in a video deposition by an HR consultant or an HR employee for TATA. And she was a senior associate of HR. Her territory for TATA covered more than a 5-state region, and there were 1,000 employees. She was the only person in that department doing that job. And she's been in HR since 2002. She has an MBA and a concentration in resource management. So it's somebody who is extremely well qualified to speak on this topic.
Interesting. And what were some of the details that she provided, Rolf?
She said that one of the really unusual and, I'd like to think of it as unacceptable things about TATA is the culture. She explained that it's an uphill battle. And even though they do have a grievance process for employees, the company can collect information using a questionnaire, and the employees will have the ability to challenge, but no changes are ever made because of that.
So they have there is something they'll fill out and say this is what's wrong, either with my relationships in the company or their relations with the company itself, but nothing really ever changes there.
Exactly. It sounds like an environment of extreme rigidity, and who knows, possibly really hierarchical too. But one of the main things that she talked about was, in terms of her work, it was that the expats, and that would be the Indians who are working in the U.S. on visas, when they were released from a project, they often raised a travel request, but that could be, back to India because their contract had ended, or because they were off the assignment, or it could be that they were reassigned. And she made a number of comments that were really interesting about RMG, and that is the agency.
About RMG?
Yes, it's the agency that is a part of TATA. It's not their internal recruiting group, but it's a team that does recruiting for external resources. And so once one of these consultants is off the project, then they will typically deal with RMG. And what they did was they would make efforts to place expats, and they did virtually nothing to place local talent at all. So she said that the culture of pro-Indian was extreme. It was unmistakable. And she said that if she saw discriminatory terminations, and if she pushed back, the only thing that happened is that she was reprimanded. So the company didn't want to accept any type of constructive criticism from her. And, she talked about inclusion and diversity. And she said there was absolutely nothing like that present in that environment. And at one point, she even said discrimination is standard operating procedure at TCS. So I thought that was really the moment that I wanted to think of for the day.
Wow, that's pretty damning testimony.
Yeah,
And
I thought that they were blown out of the water at that point.
wow, did you say or do you recall how long she was with the company?
I think I missed that detail, but I know that she's been in HR since 2002.
Okay, that's a
And
long time.
yeah,
Oh,
if
she's
that
been
really
in
came
HR
out,
a long time.
right, if that really came out during the testimony, and I missed it, my
Hmm.
bad.
No, no problem at all. But this is a seasoned HR professional making these
Absolutely.
interesting. And anything else from her testimony that struck you as interesting or noteworthy?
She talked about the preferences. She said that it was obvious that Indians were heavily favored, and that's when they were selecting people for the opening for the next role with their company, and the discrimination was just extreme,
Hmm.
completely geared toward expats.
Wow, interesting. Uh, who were the other witnesses that were there that day, Rolf?
One was a former employee, but not a member of the suit, and she just wanted to speak out against what she saw as wrongdoing. She was a TATA employee when the company had outsourced an environment, and she was not a technical worker in terms of digital electronics. She was in a different field,
Hmm.
um, and I think she was at Kaiser, the way it sounded. But she said that she wasn't from India, and she felt extreme, uh, extreme prejudice against her, and she was working a lot of hours. She took her responsibilities very seriously. And then she talked about people who had a lot less experience and a lot less qualification joking around and killing time at work, while she was more or less um, hammering out all the work and finishing the projects. And they weren't doing anything. Their work was terrible. The quality was unthinkably bad. Um, but I also liked uh, one of the testimonies that was given yesterday, and that
Mm.
was about a recruiter who was also with Tata, and she was on programs in local universities. So she was present in those environments when they were recruiting. And she mentioned that, there's the possibility of getting local hires. And so they have undergraduate and graduate. So
Okay.
they would hire from graduate schools 100% Indian candidates, and they would all be absorbed. That means they would all be placed. So they would hire a lot of other
So
qualified
were
candidates
these
from.
graduates and undergraduate students, were they on programs like OPT, J1 programs like that, as opposed to H1B? Do you know?
She didn't provide that level of detail.
Mm. But obviously, it was Indians who were getting placed, and well,
They were
recruited
getting
and
placed
placed, and you called it absorbed.
right from grad school. 100% of the ones who were hired by Tata and were placed were from India. And of the undergrads, they could hire Indian students. They could hire, almost any other students, and they remained unallocated, so they were not placed. They sat on the bench. Usually, leave them on the bench for a few months with a full salary and benefits, and then their recruiters refuse to place them because there is so much extreme favoritism towards Indian expats that they just have to they get terminated.
Wow, wow, interesting. So that would certainly explain why they're having these really disproportionate levels of South Asians versus everyone else getting terminated. Interesting.
Right. And the first HR professional that I mentioned today, she did say that according to her observation, at least 90% of the people working for Tata were from India, and that included the technical people, the lower level people, and the management. So at every echelon of the company, it was at least 90% Indian.
Wow. Wow. So, someone who's not Indian doesn't seem to have much of a chance there. and that's where all the jobs are going. I mean, they're one of the big outsourced firms. They're the ones displacing Americans. Wow.
Exactly.
Were there other testimony you heard that you thought was really interesting and noteworthy?
Those were some of the highlights. I was impressed by the fact that somebody who had worked for TATA in the past but was not a part of the lawsuit would take the trouble of providing testimony just because of the way they had operated in this environment, in the U.S.
So they kind of felt morally obligated to be a part of this.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yes.
So at this point, how long do you think this trial will go on for, Rolf?
It's scheduled now to go through December 6th.
Wow. And do you think they'll meet every day?
It looked to me that the schedule was for every day that's not a holiday.
Wow. So it's going to be pretty intense. Now, at this point, we're seeing only witnesses, the plaintiff witnesses. When do you think you'll start to see TATA witnesses take the stand?
That'll be coming up tomorrow for the first time.
Ah, I see. Now, when the witnesses took the stand the last time and today, were there pretty serious cross-examinations from the TATA defense?
I think that they tried to discredit people's testimony. They almost blatantly said that one of the witnesses, who was in a different legal case or legal situation with TATA, had some type of interest in seeing the company lose this, and so they were trying to, discredit his testimony for that reason.
Okay, because maybe he's involved in another lawsuit or something against them.
Yeah, he's actually in arbitration, so technically I don't think it's a case or a lawsuit. And it hasn't started yet, but they tried to make a big thing out of that. It seems to me that they try to find even the most minuscule detail that could be constructed to use as some sort of evidence against these people. If, for example, they didn't go to TATA's replacement or employment seminars immediately after they were laid off, and they were on the bench, they're collecting salary and benefits, and if they didn't follow everything, and that could be proven to a T, then supposedly that was a huge mark against them. When in reality, it doesn't make any difference what they do.
It sounds that way. And it sounds like, if you're a South Asian working for TATA, you don't have to worry about that. That favoritism will carry you through. Interesting.
That's the way it sounds.
So we're starting to come up on that 15-minute mark. Were there other things that you heard today that you think would be great to share with our audience then, Rolf?
There was a lot of testimony, and I thought that it was all pretty much similar. U.S. workers and people of other nationalities, even originally, people who had been naturalized U.S. citizens were being passed over for jobs in favor of Indian tech workers. And typically, the Indian tech workers were extremely low level when they started, and they had to be trained from the absolute beginning.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow. I'm thinking, you made me think of something. Members of U.S. tech workers in another city here on the East Coast. It's a couple. They were born in India. They're naturalized U.S. citizens, and one was telling me that where she will at times just test the waters and put out a resume. And on some of the resumes, she'll put U.S. citizen, and then others she won't. And she gets calls back on the resumes where she doesn't put that she's a U.S. citizen. So that seems to be fairly prevalent. It's really, it's not maybe necessarily racial discrimination, it's country of origin discrimination is what we have going on here. So, wow. Uh, okay, well, great. Rolf, if is there anything else before we end today?
Nothing really comes to mind. I think those were the best talking points that came out of the testimony today.
Well, fantastic, Rolf. Again, thanks so much for covering that. We'll look forward to hearing from you tomorrow and what you take away from tomorrow's trial or proceedings. And to our U.S. Tech Worker family, thank you so much for tuning into this. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. Better yet, subscribe to our channel. That way you stay up to date with all of our latest videos. And this is Kevin Lynn and Rolf signing off. Take care now. Bye-bye.